Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Dave. Tonight I'm joined by all these fine folks. I've got Tara from D&D in the Castle, Aliza, Lucian, and Nerdarchy's Ted, of course. If I butchered your name, just correct me over and over until I get it. You
It's
might need a
Alcuin.
squirt. Alcuin. Dang
Aliza
it.
and Alcuin.
I'm sorry. I need to arm you guys with a rolled up newspaper and a squirt bottle because I am just terrible. With that, we're gonna be talking about some D&D in a castle, and I think I'm just gonna throw it to you, Tara, because you're our executive from the castle. You're the queen, if you would.
The Queen.
So we're here to
Cool.
discuss.
Absolutely. I'm Tara. I am the yeah. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Indiana Castle, and we wanted to just join Nerdarchy, who have been to our castle a bunch of times, and share some experiences about what the castle is like. What is D&D Castle, and what's it like for the DMs? What's it like for the players here? And also share a bit about our upcoming D&D in a Castle event in the US this summer. So we have a couple of events coming up, one in July and two in August. So the four lovely rest of you are going to be running games at that event. And so we wanted to hear about what you guys have planned and what's going to be happening in your campaigns and what you're going to be bringing to the castle for our guests this coming summer.
So we're gonna all be there 18th through the 22nd. There's links in the description to not only check out the castle and the event, but also everyone on the panel here. So you can follow everyone on social media and stay informed. Who wants to go first to talk about what they're doing at the castle? Don't everybody jump at once. Well, go ahead, Ted. You started off, and then you can hand it over.
All right. So, those who are here probably are familiar with, my particular GMing style. While I include combat, I lean more towards the social and the exploration pillar. Every time I've gone to D&D in a castle, I've offered up some options. The first time I ran a game that Dave, Doug, and I all kind of wrote a backdrop and we all played in the same space. It was utterly fantastic. Second time I wound up running an extended haunted house game that I have run as one shots many times, but I stretched it out into a full 24-hour campaign. The last time when I was there, I ran a game where all of the players were kind of dragon riders, so it was kind of like How to Train Your Dragon. So I come up with a handful of options for what kind of games I'm interested in running. And then once we get to the D&D in a Castle Tavern, which is a digital space to interact with, I throw out the options. I let the players vote. And then we kind of workshop, how to build and incorporate the individual characters' wants and goals into, the growing story so that several months later, when we all arrive at the castle, we can play this, fantastic game. But all of my games are set in our homebrew campaign world of Chimes of Discordia, which is a lot of fun. And there's, lots of information here on the channel and, games that we've run, in it. And I'll get more into depth in that, once everybody's had a chance to kind of begin talking about the things that they've done.
Cool. So I'm going to suggest that the people watching, I'm assuming, know Dave and Ted quite well, but they probably don't as well know Aliza and Alcuin. So maybe you can introduce yourselves and sort of tell the viewers a little bit about who you are and what you do and your experience at D&D in a Castle. How many times you've been in the past and what you've done in the past, and then also what you're working on both generally and for players coming up in August.
Cool. I'll go next.
Hop on in. You're up.
All right. Hi, I'm Aliza Pearl. I'm an actor, writer, and pro DM. And this is going to be my third time doing D&D in a castle. The first two times I was at Lumley Castle, and now I'm going to be at Mohican with all you lovely folks. And I'm really excited about that. And I'm a writer of games in general and also storyteller in general. But for the castle, I have been bringing back this homebrewed underwater setting that is kind of like my own 5e update of Sea of Fallen Stars, because I love that setting. But there's a lot of little bits and bobs that I kind of include of my own, which is why it's a homebrew and not just a straight up update. And so, yeah, I've been running this adventure in the Sea of Fallen Stars setting the past couple times I've been at the castle, but now I'm bringing a new adventure in that same setting, and also the setting itself I'm kind of beefing up, and I'm trying to like put it on paper and formalize some things. So, so yeah, brand new adventure in the Sea of Fallen Stars. That's what I'm doing.
That sounds absolutely awesome.
Thank you.
Alcuin.
I've done a lot of castles, and my process is a lot like what Ted described with the onboarding and using like the digital tavern. So there are a lot of things I don't really work out at this point. I wait until my guests are communicating with me and they talk about like what sort of characters they want to make and how those characters are connected. And I did that for about 2 months, I think, for the hardcore game I did earlier this year. So a lot of time was spent in that tavern. But for this one, I think I've got a kind of wild idea for it, in that I want each player to have a kind of tragic champion that they play, which I think is probably going to end up being a giant of some sort. And then in each of the sessions, at least the initial sessions, there's some sort of mechanic that determines which one of those champions is going to meet their doom. Like it's all about these different champions who are basically fulfilling a prophecy, and some of them are railing against it, but they all know they're going to meet their end, basically. It's sort of a post-apocalyptic, giant-themed setting. But then when that champion goes down, they have an entourage that has come with them on this final journey, basically. And so the players make up multiple characters out of a level budget that are kind of like, but basically as the adventure goes on and all of the champions die or somehow not in the narrative anymore, they're playing increasingly lower level retainers to the original heroes, but they're still going up against this unsurmountable apocalyptic end of realities kind of Ragnarok type thing. So it's very desperate, basically, that it's kind of about tragic heroes and like sacrifices and that kind of thing. So but I think if they have different giants that they play, we'll probably collaborate on who those giant champions are. You know, there might be like a cool fire giant one and a cool storm giant one. But there are a lot of new giant types that are in Big B's Glory of the Giants, which I'd like to use because I have some of the WizKids miniatures for them, and they're really epic. They're like these Death Giant Reapers or Shrouded Ones. There's a lot of cool stuff with like Fomorian nobles. And so, yeah, I haven't done any Forgotten Realm stuff at the castle for a very long time. I usually use my own settings. But I think this new giant stuff is really interesting. I might even have it be where these giant champions are characters from Storm King's Thunder, and we treat that adventure as having happened, lore-wise, but it was a failure. Like Anam the Allfather wasn't brought back and interceded, and the ordning, the social hierarchy between the giants is still messed up, and the world is suffering as a consequence. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm hoping for. I always try to get something which I think is a little more ambitious than last time, and that's hard to do this time because I did hardcore mode, and I in a 24-hour-ish, game, I can't. I gotta be sensitive about my pacing.
Are you saying you can't put more than 36 hours of gaming into 24 hours of gaming? What's up with that?
Maybe if you stand and jump up and down on it, it'll fit. What
Yeah.
I'm hearing
Have
is
you
you got a
tried
lot of
just
cool
not
minis,
sleeping?
and you're like, we're using these.
Yeah.
Gotta work the minis in, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and the castle has a really good library of their own minis too. Like I use a bunch of things that the castle has that are kind of out of my budget, or I couldn't justify to, my wife us having in the house. Like, I need this $400 Tarask
Yeah.
miniature.
It's an investment.
It'll be really important for a few hours at some point in the near future.
Yeah.
I bought the Tarask and it hasn't really been used yet, but I have it.
Yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very popular at the castle. Those
Yeah.
those big monsters, they're very popular, especially in the final sessions.
Well, I mean, not everybody has the the advantage of being able to acquire such an amazing piece. And then, so like when you can literally put that on the board, it's like, yeah, that's really nice looking. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, I definitely love the aquatic stuff as well. Because like much like Ted in previous iterations of D&D in the castle, I've done kind of the same where I'm like, here are some suggestions, and one of them was an aquatic adventure. And I also love genre mashing. I'm actually doing like a post-apocalyptic D&D game at Gen Con, if as well as like it's basically our home game right now. And I love the fact that the ordering is the thing that broke the world in your in your game. That's such it's like such a cool piece of the lore to include. And they're like, no, it wasn't just a stupid rule for giants. It actually meant something. It's part of the balance. Um, so you had mentioned some things that are kind of similar to what I'm running for hardcore mode. I'm running Valhalla Awaits, and basically it starts off with, well, you died. But, things can get better from here. For whatever reason, your characters aren't able to make it to their afterlife that they seek. But, an ambassador from the Norse deities approaches them and offers them another chance to add an honorable afterlife and to enter Valhalla. But first they have to get sponsored by one of the Norse deities, and they have to, go on quests, and, they may even get a chance to participate in Ragnarok as a demigod themselves, as they take on more and more of the mantle of the gods that have sponsored them. Previously, like Ted said, we did the one giant campaign that we kind of meshed up at the end of it. We had one final boss battle with a undead elder brain, which we just brought together all three tables. So it was like I think there was 17 players.
17 players, 3 GMs, all running aspects. And after the culmination of that battle, all tables went back to their own gaming spaces and each got to kind of do their own, narrated ending, and allowed each character to have their own epilogue, which is always a great aspect of a game like D&D in a castle.
I can't believe how smoothly that went. Like, yeah, I did not anticipate it. And also, everyone kind of came away with like, this was really cool to do, but I don't know if I'd want to do this again.
Right.
Because it was just a lot. And then I've also ran a like Arcana Punk Eldritch Horror game, which was the last one that I ran at D&D in a castle, which is a lot of fun. We got to use airships and do some ship-to-ship combat in the air and deal with elder beings, and it was kind of like something that was spawned from a previous campaign from one of the games we played in the past. So anytime I feel like as a DM personally, like being able to take all of that lore we've been able to create over the years and bring it forth to new players and have them explore our worlds and play in our sandboxes is really great. What tips would either Lucian or Eliza give when it comes to creating like a mini campaign like D&D in a castle?
Yeah, I think everyone here has touched on it. There's definitely, for D&D in a castle, which is such a special event, I think it's really important to include and incorporate the players' inspiration for their characters. And so even if you, like me, are kind of coming with your adventure kind of already taking form, be sure to leave space to include some things that the characters will be able to do and feel really like deeply connected to. So if it's like there's an important nobleman that you're helping, make them related to in some way one of your PCs. If there's some bit of lore that's already in your adventure, then you can find a way to connect it to one of your PCs as well. So yeah, like always make space for the players when you're forming your adventure.
I mean, I think that's just great general DMing advice anyway. Like,
Yeah.
Like whatever great ideas I feel like I come up with, like the players always add so much to it. Especially if you give them room to kind of play in the playground and build.
And when you
Well,
throw like a
Absolutely.
mystery or a conspiracy at them, the things that your players speculate with each other as to like what's actually happening behind the scenes, if that's ever more interesting than what you had prepped, that's the truth now, you know?
all right.
Um,
I have to weigh in on this because there are a lot of DMs that 100% hate that advice, but
Mm.
I am solidly on board with it. I have been fortunate enough over the last decade to, have been a part of Nerdarchy and met more gamers and garnered more advice than I had the last 20 years before we started this. And if you are gaming with veterans and they are actively trying to solve your campaign, however it is, they are going to say stuff, they are going to do stuff. And those are the kind of players I love because they're going to spit out thoughts and ideas. And sometimes it is more evil than what you thought. Sometimes it is cooler than what you thought. And when you're like, oh, yep, I'm taking notes on that. And then they're like, see, I was right. Whether they were right because you planned it or because you stole their idea doesn't matter. They're gonna love that they were right.
yeah.
So
Like I
you
think
And you
got
what
it.
can
kind of like
also,
what
oh, I was just gonna say, you can also yes and it. So yes,
yeah.
bring in their idea and then add another twist on top of that that blows their mind
Indeed.
because then they're like really excited because it's what they thought it was and there's something else they
Yeah.
hadn't thought of before.
And you've
Indeed.
made an editorial choice to make that the truth, the contextual shared truth among you. But whenever you use something that they know they authored, it's that extra bit of investment for them. They're excited. The story is really shaped by the players' individual arcs for their characters and how much you fulfill and subvert that. Then whatever your big, meta plot is like that. That's
And I
just
think we do
window
see
dressing.
we see sometimes really fun sort of spin-off, very side tangential things that can become features of the castle. Um, at D&D in a Castle, it's not necessarily DMing advice, but that last summer, for example, there was the Cafe Jouiblex, or there were many pronunciations of that word. I'm just going with mine. So there was this Cafe Jouiblex that was started showing up in everyone's games, and we just love that. Sometimes these things emerge, and we, as the organizers as well, are super excited about that when we start to see things we can pick up on, and then we actually had someone. We then created a reality of Cafe Jouiblex, and we started showing up in people's rooms playing NPCs taking orders from the cafe, and we
Oh,
made
that's
Reese's
menus.
great.
and Cafe Jubilee.
So we kind of sometimes also adopt that as a greater event as well. But I did want to
Well,
pick up on something that Ted said about the type of player that comes to D&D in a castle, and in my experience, there is quite a broad representation. Like it is quite a cross section at D&D in a Castle, perhaps more than people might think, of the types of people that attend D&D in a Castle and are excited by the vision that we have of this event. Some of them are first-time players. We've had people play their first game of D&D. I know it can be hard to find a group. I know I've had people say to me, I have read all the books. I've been reading the books since the 90s, and I have never been able to get in a game. And they just came to D&D in a Castle and played their first game, for example. So we have people like that, sometimes spouses or partners of longtime people, sometimes people who've only ever been playing online or they've only been watching
Yeah,
online.
I have a lot of COVID babies in my groups.
Yeah, so a
Like,
lot
this
of
is my
times,
first time playing, in
yeah.
person.
Yeah, so I'm
well,
wondering what kind of players do you have at D&D in a Castle? What's been your experience of the players? What are they like?
well, I've seen fans of Nerdarchy and people who hadn't been familiar with who we are beforehand, and I've seen just about every aspect. Now, you mentioned somebody who's never gamed before. My first time at the castle, while they weren't at my table, there was a woman and her son who had come, and this was her first time ever playing. Well, they've come back to the castle many times, and in the last game that I ran, her and her son were actually at my table. But I've seen couples, I've seen people who have been gaming longer than I've had. I've seen people who care about every pillar of the game. The last time I was there, like this dude was like, I am all about combat. I go to work and I play D&D That is all I do. Like, he found the hobby, like, I think it was like a year and a half prior to the castle. And it was like, that's it. I come home and I join, an online game and I play like 4 nights a week. It's like, okay, this is a person who is totally become, obsessed with the hobby. Not in a bad way, just that's his life and he loves it. And then you find these people who are immersed in the game, and I've had tables where I've sat back and just watched as a half hour of them role playing with each other, of people who had never sat down at a table before, and I'm like, man, this is what I love about D&D, when you have these moments where the people, like, you got your character and you got your character and now you're gonna role play. This is awesome.
So I feel like I've gotten a lot of like forever DMs at the table as
yeah.
well, and they're great, but also one of the challenges is like all of them want to be super considerate of the other players. So everyone's like, well, I'll be whatever we need, but that doesn't work when everyone does that, or when like no one wants to make a decision because they feel like they don't want to step on anyone else's toes. So like you get like really conservative players sometimes. But once they get into it and start forming those bonds at the table, which happens super quick at D&D the Castle, very surprising. I think it's just like the glue of the game that just makes people gel super fast. And you're going through these adventures together. So, to me, like you get it seems like you get a higher quality of.
I think people
Yeah.
uplift each other too if they're at different levels of experience, right? Like I think there are old grognards like us
Yeah.
who are excited to see, newer people come into the hobby and have it be better and more diverse than it's ever been. So it's just like, yeah, I think everybody gets along really well. And I've had some of my best experiences, I think, with really like people who are significantly younger than I am, like fresher, newer, new wave D&D folks who don't have all of the baggage that I do.
The trauma,
You know?
the trauma from those early tables.
Oh my God.
But like different expectations
Yeah.
too, like just grown up, with online communities and other things that have made their experience like really different than mine. So, but they're always passionate. They're very passionate.
That's
So if
what
you
that's what I've been thinking too this whole time. Like everything you all say resonates with me. And one thing that I noticed, like all of my players at D&D and the Castle have had in common, is the passion and that ability to just like play D&D for 8 hours a day for
or
3
12
days, like, or
or 16.
12. Yeah, like that's, I mean, it's already a very special thing to want to like come and join a table and play D&D and create your character, but to also want to dive into this level and be immersed in the story in this way, it's like it's such a special thing. And I feel like as a DM at D&D in a Castle, I take that so seriously. Like you're here to be immersed in the story and to like play together and with me, and like let's have this like playground that we build and change together, and it's like it's so magical. I love it so much.
Plus,
Yeah, I
like
think
just the
everybody.
setting itself, right? It just puts everyone kind of in the mood, when you're in these castle rooms and on the castle grounds. And also, I've seen DMs, and been in games where DMs are walking their groups around and using the castle itself as a prop.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting for this Ohio castle too, because it's very like elf Rivendell, kind of a
That's going
different
to be a
thing.
very
Ooh, is
different
it?
visual. It's going to be a
Yeah,
different feeling. It's going to be like Lumley Castle is your classic medieval 12-foot stone walls, dungeons, and all. It's very heavy. It's a very heavy feeling castle, and it's very old. The castle in the U.S., it's a fantasy castle. It's not a medieval castle.
Ah.
It's a fantasy castle. It's a castle that came from someone's imagination. And I almost, although you can say one is more authentic, because we're dealing in fantasy, this isn't historic reenactment. It's about,
right.
this is a certain type of fantasy. And what we're hoping it's going to feel like is sort of a summer village, like a elven summer village. And really taking advantage of the fact that we're in the Mohican forest, which is a beautiful piece of, you know, natural beauty, and just taking advantage of the fact that we're in summer, and it's going to be, I think, going to have that kind of light, slightly lighter kind of vibe than, and a lot more going outside. At Lumley, we don't it's very rare to go outside, except for the
Speak for
archery.
yourself.
Archery.
Hey,
Depending on the time of year.
I go for walks every day at Lumley. I loved it there. The last time I was there, I know this isn't D&D related, but I was walking down the main road and there was a hedgehog that I think it tried to get me to adopt it. It was a baby little thing.
Bless.
It was freaking adorable. It squeaked at me and I was like, all right, I was this close to picking it up and having to take it home.
You could have
You're so
gotten it.
sweet. I'm always like, how are you alive in this cruel world? You trusting creature.
Yeah. It's
But
the,
yeah,
the druid and Ted.
Yeah,
I like
Ted.
animals.
I'd like to hear so about some of the things you guys were talking about, the fact that everybody is coming from different places, different levels of experience, that diversity that we do get at the castle, united by a common passion for the game. I think that is really an accurate way of putting it, and an excitement. You know, D&D in a castle is a childhood dream. Like, that's what it really is. My brother and I started the company, and that was like our childhood dream. The D&D part came more from him, but let's get all our friends together in a big house and we'll just hang out and it will be great. And then with Cam, and we'll play D&D all day, and we'll never have to do dishes.
All right,
and that's what we're excited for. That's honestly, I think, my favorite part is. But you know, and it becomes this really tight community. It becomes this family. They really become like your friends by the end. You don't want to go home. This was the dream, and we did it. But how we build that dream at the table, that's what I want to hear, because everybody comes with their vision of the dream, their version of what they're here for, and people make a lot of sacrifices to come. You know, it's not a super cheap holiday. People save for it. Some people come every couple of years as they save for it to come back, or they think it's going to be a once in a lifetime, and then they're like, damn it, I have to come back again because I can't take it. You know, so everybody has different expectations, and it is a big deal coming all the way, especially coming all the way to England for those who are coming to the UK castles, or, you know, wherever it is. It's a big investment, even taking the time, and that's what you're going to do with your holiday time. How you bring those people together so that they can hit the ground running into a really great adventure together, and avoid any trips that might happen along the way. Love to hear.
So I think there's actually two things going on here. Number one, there is the table, and then there is everybody that's there for, you know, that week's event. And I think the camaraderie that, you know, the Indiana Castle staff, you know, builds to get everybody together, you know, and, oh, let's share your story, and let's share your story, and let's do this thing. And, oh, well, we're going to do this thing this time, where you're going to have people from everybody's, you know, different tables, that, you know, these things happen. It makes it not just, oh, well, you know, for the next 72 hours, it's only about the 7 of you, your 6 people and your GM, and everybody's isolated. No, it's a group camaraderie, you know, between the feast and the ball, and, you know, the other events that go on, and, you know, the things outside of your campaign that people can interact and do together. I feel, you know, adds to the overall ambiance of the event itself. But, you know, when it comes to
Dave's not going to get to do that. He's going to be just playing D&D all day long.
That's it. Just
yes,
D&D.
for those
You don't
people
have a
going
free
into the
period to
hardcore
prep
mode
either.
yeah.
You have to. You're always on.
But, you know, for the individual tables, you know, that comes down to, I think, starting off with using the tavern, getting the conversation flowing. You know, for me, I like to, you know, ask straight up, like, okay, you know, these are the safety tools I plan on using. You know, these are, you know, my basic questions, like, what kind of game are you looking to do? So, like, I highly encourage, you know, GMs and players, interact in that tavern, get to know what's going on, so that the player, have as much foreknowledge and expectation as to what you're going to get out of the game, so that when you show up and you have your session 0, you can finalize all the little nuts and bolts, and you can begin building a rapport not only with the other people at the table, but the GM, so that the characters can begin meshing, and the stories that you've already been kind of inner working between private messages and group messages will get you, excuse me, will get you that much further and get you into the game that much faster.
My last game I did, this hardcore mode, had it was kind of a Cold War scenario with this divided city with a sort of zone of magical annihilation separating kind of like an East and West Berlin. So every player had 2 characters, and each character had a relationship map that connected them across this divide, but also to their own side. And that was just all the players just reaching out to each other in the tavern saying, hey, I love this character and I think I could have a connection to this part of their background. And then, yeah, by the time you get to the castle, you've already got this humming engine of, potential conflicts and people being reunited and all those sort of things. And the players just love that. They love to, that's why it's different than any other form of entertainment, is that you're collaborating this way.
Yeah.
So
I'm kind of curious how hardcore mode's going to go. Because from doing the regular sessions, you do your 2 sessions and then you have a break. So it's like, oh, if you have to revise some notes or rewrite something, or they go somewhere you didn't expect, you got time to kind of deal with it. Now I'm just going to be doing it live.
yeah, but I mean, you also have that extra space though, I love the normal 24 hours is a lot of gaming in the time of the castle and all that. But if you're doing the mode where, I mean, I think we did more than 40 hours the last hardcore mode I did, and we couldn't have told that story at that level of intimacy and detail, or gone up to that scale of epic conclusion and tied up every loose end that we wanted to, without that extra space, so the hardcore mode is kind of liberating and easier in that way, and that you're less likely to have to cut anything, or you can just like sit back and let a lot of player role play moments cook, and because you've got the time, that they're going to be here for a while.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully they'll give me lots of fodder to use against them.
Oh, of course.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, just let him talk. Let him talk.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, Alcuin, can you tell us about the hardcore mode experience? And we chatted a bit about it before this.
Yeah.
About
it was interesting for me because I feel like when people hear, even the other people at the castle, when they hear that there's a hardcore mode, or maybe even it's just the name of it, people assume there's a kind of like a macho aspect to it, or a sort of glutton for punishment,
meat grinder version or something.
Meat grinder, and it is honestly not like that at all. I've never had anybody in my groups. I mean, I try to balance the various pillars of combat and social and exploration, but I do run full miniatures and terrain, especially for big battles. So yeah, there's a lot of time rolling dice and measuring and people kind of strategizing that way. But I don't think that it was ever anything where it ever required like a level of knowledge. I don't think anybody should ever be turned off to the idea of like, oh, I don't know if I'm good enough at D&D to play hardcore mode. And it's like, no, it's not like that at all.
It's just more hours, right? It's more hours of playtime.
Yeah.
It's hardcore for the player, not the character.
Yeah. I mean,
you're focusing more hours on the game time than on doing any of the other activities. And for people who are not able to get regular gaming in, this is a way of like, all right, we're going to tell a much larger story, 50% more, in the same amount of time. That's pretty impressive.
But also for the folks that are interested in checking out hardcore mode, like, part of the process for being a hardcore mode DM is you have to pitch a game, and it can't just be more D&D. Like, D&D in a Castle wants it to be, something a little more special and more rules, more mechanics. You know, like you had the duality going on in your game. Um, and you know, I think Mike had ran a game where it was like kingdom building. Yeah,
Mhm.
you know, so there's got to be like an it factor to the game as well. So that people, when you're signing up for hardcore mode, that you know you're not just getting more D&D, but you're getting more of a like specialized.
I think also when people decide to come to the castle, some of them are very driven by like, I want to play with the Nerdarchy guys, you know, like this is why I'm going. But I think some people, they kind of make the decision of wanting to have this sort of vacation, and then they look into like what is a good fit for me or for my, if they're going with other people, like what will we all like. I know that they look at the bios, their bios of the DMs on the website, and you know they make that decision at that point. And with the hardcore mode, you do get a synopsis basically of like, this is the type of game it's going to be. So if you're not necessarily familiar with a bunch of, you know, I mean, if you know who Mark Mir is, you want to be in his game. But then if you don't, you know, and you want to look at what type of game it is, especially because I think a lot of the advertising for the games will say like, oh, I like really role play heavy stuff, or and yeah, having to submit a proposal, and knowing when you sign up for the hardcore mode what the story type is going to be is that's a cool product offering, you know.
Well, and that's the advantage of the way, you know, D&D in a castle is set up, is you can do that research. You can be aware, like, you know, whether it be I want to game with this person because I follow their channel, or I, you know who they are and I want to be in that experience, or, you know, you look at the bios and you see, you know, this is the style of game that I enjoy the most. You know, I'm gonna be a part of that. So, like, you know, you select that one. But some people, they aren't looking for any of that. They're like, look, I don't get to play enough D&D. Sign me up. I don't care whose table I'm at, because no matter which GM you're gonna play with at D&D in a castle, you're gonna get an epic story. You're gonna get a grand adventure, because that's what D&D in a castle is.
There's
Yeah.
a question in the chat you guys can all kind of address, but also it actually happened in my first D&D in a castle. The one that the kind of the pilot in France, and I went there as a player. So Fleem, how do you feel about PvP one shot events? My group has done a few times, and some of them seem to like it, but never have been fun. So one of the things that happened in my first experience was James Intercasso and DM Tim brought their tables together in kind of like a contest of champions style battle, where it started off in this huge arena that like would slowly shrink as the combat would go on, and like between the rounds a beholder would drop like a disco ball and spin around with its anti-magic cone, wiping away any magic that was on the field, so no one was kind of like stun locked out of the game. And it was a lot of fun because we got to like go all out, you know, against the other side, and then like things kind of got reset and we were sent back to where we were. It was just like a fun little interlude that the GMs had just decided to do together. So in that instance, I had a lot of fun with it. Generally, I don't like PvP in my campaigns per se, cause you know nothing will end a friendship like a bad PvP. But you know, if a game's designed that way, you can have some fun with it. Who wants to jump in there?
All right, I'll answer. Mine will be, you know, much quicker story. I pretty much agree with Dave. I'm not into PvP unless it is a situation where there are no repercussions. So, like, I once, you know, ran a campaign, and one of the sessions, you know, they were in this kind of dreamscape, and they all saw, and I had put everybody out on the battle map and replaced every character with a different monster. And, you know, I tried to make it be as equivalent as possible, based on what the characters were. And it's like, all right, you don't see your friends anymore, you just see monsters. And Dave, who's totally in this kind of stuff, he's like, all right, I go full bore and just start attacking, where others were a little bit more hesitant. because they didn't know what the repercussions were going to be. So those are the kind of things that I enjoy for PvP. I don't want to be like, oh, well, I'm going to dominate you and kill your friend here, because that's no fun. But that's just me.
And
Yeah.
oh, go ahead, Aliza.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with what you both said. And for me, there's a line because I'm not going to say um, PCs and their players can't ever disagree. Sometimes disagreements happen and you can feel tension at the table that needs to be resolved somehow. And sometimes the best way to do that is through the game. Instead of having players argue, have their characters hash it out. And usually that resolves it, in my experience. So I don't say no PvP, but I say let's proceed with caution. Like if this actually turns out to be two characters actually fighting it out and not just RPing through a hard time, then we're gonna have to be real extra special careful about this.
Right.
That's never happened. It's never gotten to that point, but because I think even just having a little bit of role-playing PvP, which is probably not what the question was about, but having that be in the RP and allowing space for it can be really healthy for the game dynamic. But to address the question more directly about a PvP one shot, that sounds awesome. And I love special one shot ideas like that. So, yeah, it's interesting that Fleem, you said it's never fun as a DM. I've never run that. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how I would experience it. But now you've got me thinking. I'm going to think about that more.
Yeah, I think that I like the potential for conflict and the same sort of cathartic role-playing stuff that Aliza's talking about. But I like to build an intrigue. And in this last hardcore game, there was a lot of intrigue between characters on the different sides. But we really had to struggle. Everybody is so trying to be accommodating and make space for other people that sometimes no one really wants to be the bad guy and like cause conflict. So you have to create a space where they feel safe to do that, and that they know that, it's not just, well, this is what my character would do, that they're all kind of very sensitively sharing this narrative that has this potential for PvP conflict in it. But I mean, I did have characters fighting at various points, but it was more like stuff they instigated themselves of like, oh, let's go back to that time when, Saint Agnes was martyred and our characters fought each other and we were lost and separated in the rift afterwards and partially, corrupted and those sort of things. Let's go back and have a flashback of that fight. And then they would play against each other and they were just, whatever the results were. They were going to integrate that into the narrative of like, oh, okay, that's what happened back then.
I love that.
Yeah, and that's fun as long as it doesn't bleed into the table, right? Like outside of the game, that's where it becomes a problem. Like we had in the game where we ran kind of all the same setting at D&D and Castle. One of my players were poked around where they shouldn't have been, with one of these eldritch horrors, and he got mind controlled, but they used him as a sleeper agent, and so in the final battle he was triggered, and like so he was basically charged with, well, take out whoever you think the most threatening character would have been the wizard. Now what I didn't know is those two players had some conflict in a one shot that happened the night before, and the one was actually pissed at the other one already. So when he got mind controlled and flipped, he was so happy. Like he just like totally destroyed that character.
Oh my god.
So sometimes there's things you don't know about that can kind of like come up.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I will say too is whenever I'm starting, prep with my players, and especially this is for streamed games especially, but I think it helps with private games as well. My rule is that you can play the most cantankerous, grumpy, misanthrope character. That's fine. But you have to want to be in this party, and you have to at least like/want to protect, if not love, your fellow party members. You can be as grumpy as you want. You can, I don't care, but you have to have this underlying like care for each other, because otherwise, to me, it doesn't work. Otherwise, you're gonna just go off. Why are you here? Find
players I've
reason
had
to
have always been
be.
great about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
feel like
most people are, but it's a good reminder, I think, you know.
if you play the game long enough, you always run into those players, and it's like
Yep.
you just, as the DM, you're just asking yourself, why are you here? And then, frankly,
I
that's why.
refuse the call to adventure.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. It's like
that's why that's why we need to have session zeros, and you need
Yeah,
social
yeah.
contracts, and you need to make sure everyone's on the same page, so you don't have this stuff come up in the middle of your campaign and wreck your possibly friendships as well. We're here to have fun, not to fight with each
Dave ran a campaign well before Nerdarchy, many, many moons ago, and we had a character who was not interested in adventuring, but that wasn't the player choice. It was a character choice. And there was all kinds of narrative things. And like he would go on the adventure because his master told him to do so. And of characters that I've, played alongside of, Giles the librarian is still to this day one of the most hilarious characters that I've played beside, because he was a wizard and his master was like, nope, you have to get real world experience before I teach you more. And the
That's
way,
juicy.
my
He had a
the
reason
way
to
my
be there,
friend
though.
RP.
Yeah.
But you even I love that, because even underneath all that, he had a reason to be there. He had a motivation to
Mhm.
stick with it.
And it wasn't the player saying, no, I don't want to do this, I don't want to take part.
Right.
It was the character
begrudgingly
hesitant.
doing all the things. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it added to the RP, it added to who this character was. And then when things went south for this character, like when hardship would happen, it would only further be like, look, do you see the kind of nonsense I have to deal with? Can't I just stay behind the wall where it's safe, please? It was just glorious.
That sounds fun.
I overlay a lot of role-playing prompt-based things with inspiration mechanics. Like, I don't like the system of inspiration of just like, someone says a funny joke or, wow, you did a good job at role-playing, like, here's an inspiration, because I would just forget to give them out, Or you get somebody who is so consistently good at every scene, you'd be like, why, So I have an inspiration pool that all the players share, and anybody can earn stuff towards it. But there's usually some sort of mechanic where they can choose to have a failure or a conflict or an obstacle be more difficult for their character. And once they've done that, had both a positive and a negative, that's when the inspiration is earned and goes into the pool. So there's always a prompt, Like I had a couple of years back, I did a Mythic Odysseys of Theros campaign, and I used a wheel and woe, like the augury system for that inspiration spending mechanic. And that people went into this playing characters who were adventurers who saved the world 10 years ago, but their found family kind of fell apart. So there was a lot of bad blood between them. And some of that had been worked out, in the tavern as they're making their characters, like, oh, I'm so-and-so's son who felt neglected, or, I'm your sister, and it was never the same, after you did this in our previous adventure. But they knew they basically, in order to earn an inspiration for that session, had to spend both this positive and this negative currency to basically call a scene, either with another player or an NPC in the environment. And so those sort of prompts really, get people involved. I know we were talking earlier about like what other additional mechanics do you layer into things like hardcore mode, and like that's one of them. Is I think that because people are trying so hard to make space for other people, they kind of sometimes don't know, like, is this a good time for me to step up with this thing about this sorted event in my past that I need to sort out with you? Like, when is a good time, in our arc as a group to have this happen? And so if there's some sort of mechanic that drives that in the game, it helps people, especially like, I as a autism and ADHD spectrum person, like, I'm not necessarily bad at social stuff, but I'm analytical about it. And you're kind of looking at it and be like, am I talking over this person? Is this person interested? Is now a good time for me to drop this bit of my backstory? And having mechanics like that in place, I think, help for, autistic and neurodivergent people alike, just as how are we going to collaborate? What's the currency that we spend to make the scenes occur in what order or whatever? And so, yeah, I think that's one of the fun things about the Castle games that I really remember, is people engaging with those kind of systems for role-playing prompts.
Yeah.
I have a question for the DMs. Two things. One is the format of D&D in a Castle was sort of just a replica of D&D in the 90s, of just playing all weekend, all day, and all night. And that's certainly what my brother Cameron did throughout his entire youth. And most people who were playing that long ago, that was sort of how they experienced D&D. And in adult life, we don't get to experience D&D that much unless you take your vacation time and go somewhere like a castle. So we create the environment to allow that to happen, and the format to allow that to happen. So I'm curious from you guys what the format and the setting, how that affects the game, and then how you use that as a DM, how you affect the game, as well. Particularly, people might be watching this thinking about coming to the castle in the summer. What kind of a game do you offer in that setting? How do you take advantage of that setting, and how does that format affect the gameplay?
So I think the structure of D&D in a castle, the way it works, is actually lends itself really good to like a kind of the 3-act storytelling. And that's how I've kind of broken it down, with 2 parts to each act, for the regular 24-hour game session. And going into hardcore mode, I was a little intimidated by, just the sheer amount at first, but then I thought about it, like our original D&D group used to play every Saturday. And we would get together from 3 to 4 in the afternoon and play till the sun came up. So I was like, oh, really? This is like just 2 sessions. So it's like, maybe it's not that big a deal after all. But yeah, so like I think the structure of the way the game works is 2 sessions a day, 3 days, kind of lends itself really well to storytelling, and then just the environment itself is just inspirational.
So I think having, things jam-packed, together, really condenses and allows a story to be told in rapid fire. So right now on our channel, for those who aren't familiar, we run 12 session games every Tuesday nights. Sessions are 2 hours. So essentially what we tell over the course of, 3 months gets, squished down, because it's the same amount of time. It's 24 hours of gaming. So we've been writing this way for, a number of years now, to do this 12 session story arc. So that format is already in our minds as to how we're doing things. We're just having to squish, 1 and 2 into the first session, and 3 and 4 into the second, and so on and so forth. So when I'm designing these things, I typically come up with an outline of things that I want to do when I start beginning to, flesh out my material. But, as Aliza says, like, you need to fill in, or you need to leave room for the players to be able to put stuff in. And, whether it be ahead of time through the tavern, or, at your session 0, hours before you're going to start playing the following morning, there needs to be wiggle room. And then as a DM, you have to be able to adapt when players do something that, you might not, accept, and you don't have a whole lot of time. So when I was there last, I came with, a crap ton of options. I had a suitcase that was just full of, maps and minis and some terrain stuff. Just I'm like, well, if in case they decide to go this way, what have you, I've got it. And I had a whole fire themed island in my adventure that the party never touched. I didn't need to worry about it. But
that's where you secretly move the island somewhere else.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I tried to prepare way more stuff than I could possibly use in my 24 hours, because I really care about player agency. So even in a 24-hour, 6 session thing, I still want to say, here's your play space. What are you going to do with it? I don't want to be like, well, I don't have time to do this, so I'm not even going to put that on the option, when I had already started to prepare and talk about it. So that's my general thought pattern and how I use the space.
I'm interested to see how elfy it is, because I'm known for my passion for elf and elf themed things, and here I am doing a giant theme, but I mean, I think a lot of the melancholy that you get from elves in fantasy settings of kind of how we're leaving the world behind, and our time is coming to an end. I might try to integrate some of that. And I don't know, maybe there's some elven characters or factions that are part of the story. But yeah, I mean, I really have to check in with the players and see what the players like. If they're like, well, no, we're in Rivendell, let's have some elf stuff, then like, okay, this is where we're going, you know?
Yeah, I'm also interested in the elfiness because with Sea of Fallen Stars, a lot of the deep lore is that, sea elves are land elves who evolved into sea elves. And so there are these just ancient structures and just ancient lore that is the elves who came from land. And I've kind of touched on it lightly in the previous adventure, but it's something that I really want to explore more. So now I'm like, I need to see more of this castle. But yeah, anyway, to answer the question as well, I come from I'm like a newer D&D player, so maybe some of the players who started playing during COVID might relate to me a little bit more. I started playing and running games in 2017. So I'm newer. I've never before D&D in a castle had the experience of playing all day D&D. Like that is a treat for me. It's something newer for me, and especially not running all day D&D. But that said, um, I feel like I still approach the game similarly to what Dave was describing, which is you have your 3x structure, which is really easy to lay over those 3 days. And of course, there's some adjustments that have to be made sometimes if players spend less time or more time on one part of your
So
story.
many adjustments.
So many adjustments. Yeah, it's a constant adjustments. I actually come from improv. And so I think that's why I took to DMing so quickly and so well, because I'm an improviser. And D&D, like as much prep as I love to hyper focus and just do prep for games, I'm also like improving most of the time when I'm DMing. So it's a nice like fun balance. But yeah, that said, I also like to really approach my games as like in my mind, I'm creating this playground for you all to explore and discover. So I especially I'm also a video game writer, so I especially like to look at games at like tabletop role playing games as like we build the setting for you to come and click on things and open doors and find things, and the NPCs are there for you to come up and like literally it's very similar in my mind the way I run games. um and so that's how that's how I build a game. There's still an act structure in there, but the clues you find in each setting will lead you to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Or you can go this way and find other things, but that's generally how it works in my tables.
I believe we have a Tara question in the chat. Not all who wanders are lost. How good are the venues at accommodating various dietary restrictions?
Oh, I can also
All the
speak to
venues that we, yes,
that.
all the venues that we work with are hotels, and they run hotel catering, banqueting events all day, every day. That is their core business, or that is a core part of their business is feeding the guests, members of the public. So yes, they are very conscientious, very well prepared, very accustomed to that. It has not been a problem since we started working with hotels. They deal with this as a matter of course. It's something they're set up to do, and as long as we have that information before we start, we are able to offer any options. We always offer and include gluten-free and vegan options in our general spread. And sometimes the vegan options are the best things in the menu.
Often they are, yeah.
As well as any particularly specialized diets. They will prepare special meals or special food for them. All the meals are included at D&D in a Castle as part of registration, as well as in-game snacks and refreshments. So there's like an infinite supply of energy drinks, soda, coffee, tea, all the things, as well as snacks and things. And so we make sure that that gaming room will be supplied with things that meet that person's needs, whether that's different kinds of milk or creamer to put in coffee and tea, different kinds of snacks, something completely separate on a separate plate if they can't touch anything. So we're very careful about that. And their hotels, they're used to dealing with that kind of thing is the basic answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Excessive amounts
can.
of Mountain Dew.
I was gonna say, yeah, keep the Diet Coke flowing, my friend.
Yeah. I can speak to that as well as, I have some pretty severe food intolerances and chronic illness disability. So my diet is very important to like how I function every day. And I have felt very, very well taken care of at D&D in a Castle events. I've never gone hungry. I've gained weight, and it's like the best few pounds ever to like leaving a castle and having
You're pampered
eaten
at the
so well.
castle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
seriously. Like I was always like, yes, I those 5 pounds. I'm happy to get those because like it's really a treat. And as someone who's gluten free, like very what's it called? Very sensitive to cross contamination, gluten free, and low dairy. Like there's always dessert for me. Like that's amazing. And I'm sure whoever put that in chat knows how special that is to always have an actual dessert and not just like steak, salad, and fruit like as your options. So yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, and my experiences have been, they've been very accommodating. I don't have any restrictions. I just like to eat, so it was a good time.
No one goes hungry at the castle. I'll tell you that. We
Yeah.
know.
If you do,
You
it's
also
your
are
fault.
hydrated really well.
Yeah.
There's always drinks, water, fruit. Yeah, it's great.
So-
Healthy choices, less health, like delicious things. Yeah.
So
It's
we
great.
are coming up on the hour mark. Does anyone have any final thoughts before we head on out?
I think I just want to hear from everybody. First of all, if you want to pitch anything, this is your moment. If you want to tell people about where to find you, what you're working on, where they can find your work, and what keeps you coming back to D&D in a Castle? What's special about it that makes you want to come and be part of it? I'd love to sort of end on that note. For me, I started it, so I'm here for the long haul. But also, I love coming back to D&D in a Castle. I often say people that come for the D&D and you stay for the community. I think it's the secret sauce, is that passion we talked about, the commitment that everybody has to creating this beautiful community and this beautiful dream. It's so wonderful to just go and be among friends, and it's all made for you. You get to just show up and be in it, and it's the real deal. So for me, that's what it's about. And my stuff is D&D in a Castle, so that's my only plug. Find us on all the channels at D&D in a Castle.
Eliza?
Sure,
Aliza, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It'll stick one day. Yeah, so you can find me at Aliza Pearl, Aliza, and then Pearl at Gmail. No, not in Gmail. I always do that. Like I go, and that's not even my email address. Weird. You can find me at Aliza Pearl on Twitter and Instagram. I'm on TikTok, but I don't post very often. You can follow me there if you want. But definitely keep an eye out on my itch. I actually don't even know what my itch site is. I'm trying to look it up real quick, but itch.io, probably /Aliza Pearl. I'll find out in a second. I have a couple of things that I'm going to be releasing on there. I mentioned I'm a video game writer as well. And so one thing I want to say and kind of tease about my castle experience that I'm preparing for my players is that if you are someone who has wanted to play in an underwater castle or an underwater D&D game and campaign before, this is the thing to play. I hear things like Dave said, some players have requested that. I kind of hear dribbles of it, and I, as a player, had never experienced it, so I built what I would have wanted as a player. And another thing, just to get into the guts of it a tiny bit without spoiling anything, is that I have made my own chart of playable D&D races from Sea of Fallen Stars that are not playable in that setting. So like I'm talking literal like weird fishy people that you can play and have full stats for in my game. So that's, if that's something that sounds appealing to you, definitely check out my game. And keep an eye out at my itch, which I can't find right now, but you'll find it. I believe in you if you want to.
Alcuin.
Yeah, I'm Alcuin Gersh. On most places in the internet, you can find me as Different Elves. That's on like Twitch and Twitter and Instagram. I'm actually Gen Con is happening just before this castle event we're running, but that's my beginning of August, and then I'm going to get to finish it out with this Mohican castle. And I will be running some games for D&D in a castle there. I'm going to be bringing back one that I did last year, which was very popular, which is incorporates the adventure running in reverse, starting on the cusp of a TPK, and then running back to exploring the environment, facing the minions, meeting the NPC at the tavern, and receiving the quest. So it runs in reverse, and which scenes happened previously and some of their outcomes and how people can interact with them are based on like a sort of Family Feud style mechanic. So it's about deconstructing a lot of the tropes, like, well, before you got here to almost die in front of this boss, you faced a cult. What was that a cult of? What were their minions? What was the dungeon that they were in? What environment was that dungeon in? And we work our way backwards using the sort of Family Feud style mechanics. So that's called In Medias Res, and there will be multiple sessions of that running in Gen Con, I think in the evenings through D&D in the Castle. So if you look at the Gen Con catalog, I think it'll be in there under that. And I'll also be running stuff for Hunters Entertainment at Gen Con, which is another game company. I think I'm going to be running Ragnarok, which is their heavy metal fantasy themed game, which I ran last year, and it's just a joy to meet other people and talk about their favorite bands and over the top heavy metal scenarios. So that's through Hunters Entertainment. If you look at Hunters Entertainment website and what their Gen Con schedule is, I'll probably be there at their booth or offsite, however they do it this year. For my game in Mohican Castle, I think you'd be interested in it if you like the idea of creating a tragic hero, and then who are the found family, the retinue, the entourage that are there to pick up the pieces when that hero falls, when they face their doom. So I think a lot of the end game of that campaign is going to be very much about people who are not prepared to pick up the torch and sort of carry these relics across the finish line, but they have to do it because they've built their life around their service to this ideal or to this champion, and now that champion is gone, and they're the only ones left. So you have the opportunity to make multiple characters. There'll probably be a budget beyond the champion that you play until their demise. You might have 9 levels worth of characters you could make. Is that 9 level 1 kobolds who are part of a fanatical following of this person? Is that a 5th level and 4th level, Padawan and novice following in the footsteps of this person? But they'll have a budget. But the only rule is that you move to the next highest level character when, and I often go for very high lethality in my games, DC 15 death saves, a lot of other mechanics to usher in these moments of sacrifice. So if that sounds fun to you, then that's the Mohican Castle game I'll be running.
Jump in there, Ted.
Sure. So I mean, I've already, kind of loosely touched on, some of the things that I'm contemplating for D&D in a Castle. To answer, Tara's question, I've been there 3 times, and I kind of agree with what you're saying, that the aspect of the game and the community, really makes it a, standout vacation. I've talked to, many repeat, D&D in a Castle, gamers that they love going, and they can't wait until they can get back to the castle because it's such a phenomenal experience. So if it's in your budget and you're on the fence, it really is worth it. It's a phenomenal experience. And the people, both staff and guests have, been nothing but amazing.
Yeah, I think this will be my 4th castle that I've been to with you guys now, because I was over in France, 2 in the UK, and now this one. So this is really really exciting to explore these different venues with D&D in a Castle. So if you want to play hardcore mode and just game for 36 hours straight, well, maybe not quite straight, but an excessive amount of D&D, come hang out. I'll also be at Gen Con running some games for D&D in a Castle from my Under the Dome setting, which is like a post-apocalyptic. It's basically a Mad Max style race that I'm going to be running, where everyone gets devil's rides from out of the abyss, and you win a race however you can, and your other opponents will be trying to do the same. I want to thank Dean and the Castle for having us all, and putting this thing on so we get to do it. We were talking, about why we come back. Well, you guys fed me, and I'm like a stray. So as long as you keep feeding me, I'm gonna keep showing up. So I guess you might as well just have me GM as well. Although I might want to sneak off to Aliza's game, because I really want to play in that underwater
Yes,
campaign.
you could be an NPC.
They'll be like, "Where's Steve? Shouldn't he be running a game someplace right now?" Blurp, blurp, blurp,
Or we
blurp.
could switch.
Yeah. With that, I want to thank everyone for being here and everyone who hung out with us. The links are all in the descriptions. Go check them out. Not just to D&D and Castle, but to our guests as well. Go follow them and check them out. They're awesome people. And until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.
Thanks, guys.